Hey, and we are live. The MMA Vivisection. My dog is over there gnawing on something, so she's a little distracting. But I'm here to introduce Eddie Mercado, Victor Rodriguez, and we are going to talk about Bellator Dynamite 2. I'm going to do the presidential thumbs up for a lot during this. We're here to talk Bellator Dynamite 2, Quentin Jackson versus Satoshi Ishii, Michael Chandler, Patricky Freire. Um, and I was gonna try and draw a little more out of the prelims for this one because there's like 40 fucking fights on this card, and it feels like we should really, not skip all that. But frankly, it's not 40 fights that I want to talk about. It's the main card and one prelim, and then maybe I'll throw a little love towards a couple other guys before we get in anything too deep on anything. But first of all, Eddie, what do you think about this Dynamite 2 offering?
I'm really excited, especially for this main card. I think it's a really solid card with a bunch of different interesting stories. I mean, each fight has its own specific interest for me. First off, find me on Twitter at the Eddie Mercado. Aside from that, there's a preview for this Bellator Dynamite 2 card that you can find on Bloody Elbow.
Oh shit! Wait! Who wrote that one?
It's that good-looking dude with the hair.
Oh, Eddie with the good hair.
Not Zane, the brown guy.
It's Eddie with the good hair coming through, working hard.
Actually, the hair wrote it all. I just kind of. But no, I mean it's a lot of backstory and a lot of just the things you need to know about it. So go check that out if you haven't already. But as for the card itself, yeah, I'm pretty excited about it. Aside from kind of a weak prelim, there's some interest. Some guys returning, some guys debuting. A title fight that should, in my personal opinion, be the main event. But sport versus business. But I'm happy.
All right, Vic, what are your thoughts on this?
First off, this is how you know that Eddie deadlifts for sure, because he carries those plugs on his back like a champion. I gotta applaud the upsell every time. I love it. That's great shit. As far as this card goes, well, we have to remember there's two elements to this, and it's actually three. You've got your undercard with the local regional fighters, and obviously the main televised portion, and then you've got the kickboxing part, which we're going to touch upon a little bit later on. But you've got 16 fights overall. A lot of it may seem like filler. And honestly, a lot of it kind of is, to the point that it's mostly for the local crowd that's going to be present, and then that's fine, I suppose. But as far as the main card goes, there's definitely a lot of intrigue in some of these bouts, and it's going to be interesting to see what direction some of these fighters go in, and what the company does with some of these fighters as well. So we're going to get into that as well as we break this down.
All right. Yeah, it's a card like I don't know, like I like it as a general Bellator card, but it is making me wonder a little bit, like what is a Dynamite card, like
what constitutes it as Dynamite?
Exactly.
Well, I'll tell you what. Sorry.
Okay, Vic. No, you have an answer.
No, I'm sorry. Well, I think it's really getting into the spirit of the old Japanese events, in which we'd see that the giant spectacle of having both kickboxing and MMA, all this coming in, is sort of like this confluence of combat sports coming together, and that's where the grand spectacle comes in. It just seems a bit underwhelming now, and I guess maybe now they're using that label or that brand as something to denote that this is one of those bigger events to co-promote both of the MMA and kickboxing aspects.
I guess part of it is too. I should note that because they now have this Bellator kickboxing co-promotion that they're doing, and they're doing it, I believe, on the same night, stacked right after the Bellator event. It's gonna have Joe Schilling versus Hisaki Kato. Raymond Daniels is on it. Kerry Melendez is on it. But I can't. It's really hard to get a sense of when and where those bouts will be aired and how much of that crossover that fans are going to experience. If I'm not going to see Raymond Daniels during this event, is part of the Dynamite lineup, then in what sense is Raymond Daniels adding anything to me on this card? Like, I'm really happy to see Raymond Daniels fight. He's awesome. I'm happy to see Joe Schilling versus Sasaki Kato. But I really have trouble getting a sense of, like, is that just going to drop in, you know, between Rebecca Ruth Elamale McFarlane and Matt Mitrione, why did I pick the hardest names to fucking pronounce?
I was about to ask, yeah.
Tafa? Like, I don't know where on this card those things are going to come into play, because if it's just going to be after the event, there's also going to be a kickboxing card streaming online or released on tape delay a week later, as Bellator Kickboxing seems to be following that Glory model. Then who gives a shit? Like, what makes this Dynamite? Is it really just, you know, Tara Walker versus Mimi Kutzin and Elmir Kulozman versus Daryl Cobb? Because that don't mean shit to me. Like,
it's not quite Dynamite.
No, and in the first one they had some legit kickboxing in the middle of it. I can't remember the guy's name. They had a Russian guy who's really a very talented kickboxer and just kind of flew way under the radar. But anyway, the point being, you know, even looking at this, like the poster for Dynamite just says Rampage, Ishii, Chandler, Pitbull, Mitrione, Semanathapa, and you don't get any of that, like, oh yeah, and kickboxing crossover or any of that. So,
they do have those. They do have the other posters that are for the Bellator Kickboxing, where you'll see Kato and Schilling up there. But
it feels like a separate event, you know. Like, if it's a separate event, if it's not mixed in with the card, then to me it's not adding that flavor.
They may be attempting to entice MMA fans who otherwise may not be too into watching kickboxing bouts, and kind of setting up a little bit of that Trojan horse deal. I don't know if that's maybe what they're going for.
Maybe it makes me a little, I don't know.
I mean, I don't understand why they don't just have those be the prelims.
Yeah,
like, scratch this stuff that no one really cares about and no one's ever heard of, and let's get the actual talented kickboxers starting the show. You know, like, why is that not a thing?
It's something that I don't know. I don't understand it, because at the end of the day, I end up looking at this Dynamite card, and I don't. It's just it feels like a tentpole event, but it doesn't feel like a spectacle. Like, I don't think of this, and I don't have the same vibe that you're getting when, like, Ryzen's debut show. You know, that feels like, to me, what these Dynamite shows should feel like, where you're getting some kickboxing, you're getting some judo, you're getting a tournament, you're getting all this crap that's just, like, I have no idea where any of this is going, and these fights feel weird, but they're big, and I'm excited about all of them. Here, it's like a Bellator card. It looks like a Bellator card, and I don't have any of that feeling out of it. So,
yeah. I mean, it's slightly Bellator Plus. And the very least they could do is at least throw in some live music and juggling like EFN. But hey, what are you gonna do?
That's right.
Well, we'll at least know by Dynamite 3 what's going on, I hope.
Hopefully. Anyway, so I'm just going to give a quick run-through on some prelim stuff that may be worth watching, and then we're going to jump into Justin Lawrence versus Isao Kobayashi. But also on these prelims, former UFC fighter Guilherme Vasconcelos is fighting somebody named Jordan Dowdy. Vasconcelos was a pretty good BJJ grappler and tough fighter who flamed out of the UFC pretty early in his career. Also, UFC vet Chris Heatherly is on the undercard fighting a relatively unknown but certainly powerful-looking prospect, Joaquin Buckley. And I'm also kind of interested in this in Rashard Lovelace. He looks like he might be a pretty decent fighter on the undercard. And maybe Chell Irwin Davis on the undercard. There's just a few fighters worth checking out, looking out for. After that, we're going to jump in Justin Lawrence, Isao Kobayashi. And Vic, what are your thoughts on this fight?
This is going to be great. You have two You have a very dynamic athlete in Justin Lawrence, and you've got more of a scrappier but still very versatile athlete in Kobayashi. And the only real shame here is that it appears that this fight's going to be what opens not the main card but actually the prelims. So this is going to be very early on, and I think a lot of people might end up missing it, unfortunately.
Well, we never know. Bellator's like I see that and I'm like, that can't be right. And I have this feeling like on the night it's going to be the featured prelim. They tend to just mix their whole undercard up at will.
I really hope you're right. I really hope you're right, because it would be something of a disservice if that wasn't the case. Now, it should be noted, Lawrence he is coming off a loss to Emmanuel Sanchez. No shame there. Sanchez, a rising prospect. We've seen him perform and grow and mature as a fighter. And, Lawrence is doing his thing, too. He's fought for RFA. He's had a few fights in Bellator, just 1-1 currently there. Very solid wrestling, very hard hitter, very smart with his positional awareness. Kobayashi is a little more reckless, a product of the Japanese scene where, it's very clear that the transition between phases of his game are a bit janky. But his striking is competent. His striking defense may cause him some fits, and his wrestling defense is what really gives me pause in this. He is able to scramble beautifully and snatch some submissions, or at least go for some very interesting submission attempts out of nowhere. So he certainly has that going for him. But I do think that in the end, Lawrence is going to be too much. He's going to probably overpower him, be savvy enough to stay out of any trouble on the submission end, and be able to choose his shots with the ground striking very carefully to ride out a decision win on this.
Eddie, what are your thoughts?
I think that maybe Bellator is just trying to get people to tune into their prelims, maybe early on. We saw them do that at Bellator 153 with Chris Honeycutt. They put him as the second prelim, where, he's, obviously, he went from a main event to a prelim. So, it's not unheard of for them to do something like this. But I'm excited for it. I think this is going to be a sleeper fight, and it could even turn into fight of the night, potentially. We got Pitbull and Chandler, so I don't know. But, yeah, I think both guys kind of got a raw deal in their debuts as far as stylistic matchups go. Whereas Justin Lawrence, he's got this karate style, and, he's a pretty damn good striker, but he fought someone who's just fundamentally sound on the feet. And, that's a tough way to get your debut in when you're predominantly a striker and you have to face someone who is, pretty
It was his
damn...
second Bellator fight. I'm just going to point that out before you get
For Lawrence?
Yes.
Was it? Okay. Who was his first fight?
Sean Wilson, 35-25.
Oh, yeah. That was...
Journeyman vet.
Okay.
Anyway.
Well, either way, their last fights, we'll say. How about that? And Kobayashi, he got a guy who was more than willing to keep it on the ground and just grapple with him. And that's not really Kobayashi's MO. He's trying to come in, make it ugly, and just knuck. And that's going to make this one interesting. I feel like it kind of plays into Lawrence's game plan a little bit with the openings, we'll say, that Kobayashi gives. I see Lawrence being able to exploit those, not necessarily get a finish, but I think he's smart enough to mind his P's and Q's on the feet, and I think he is smart enough and has the ability to not get taken down. And for that reason alone, I think it's his fight to lose here. So I'm going to pick Justin Lawrence by decision.
Yeah, Lawrence definitely seems like the better athlete and the more consistent fighter. My only worry for him is I just wonder if he's maybe not the toughest fighter between them. Like, I kind of feel like Lawrence will be having all this success in fights, and then something small will go wrong, and it just seems like suddenly the whole fight falls apart for him.
You kind of saw that in the Sanchez fight, but he got hurt though, so it was like.
Well, that's what he got hurt how? Like, I don't remember.
He got kicked in the face at the end of the second round.
Yeah, so he got hurt like he's not the most durable, toughest guy out there in the world. Every fighter gets hurt, right? Like, that is how you define toughness, is do you get hurt and how badly. I don't know. I feel like like Lawrence, it's always sort of like he'll be doing really well, but everything's always on the knife edge for him. You know, if he's not getting a quick KO, then it's like, yeah, he could be dominating, but at any moment, all the wheels could come off. With Kobayashi, he's way sloppier and less likely to dominate, but he also, I don't know, just feels like he's a much more, I don't know, consistently tough, hard-headed fighter. So I kind of wonder if that could be a swing point in this fight. There's no odds, so I can't give you any advice on odds or anything like that.
This is kind of a pivotal fight for both guys, you know?
Yeah.
It's like, who's going to be that up-and-comer?
The crossroads fight for two prospects who have massively underproduced so far in their careers from the expectations given for them. I mean, Kobayashi was expected to come out and be, like we're talking about like 4 years ago, Kobayashi was supposed to be the next big thing out of Japan. And here he is years later losing to Goichi Yamauchi on a Bellator card. Like, he's not making any kind of splash that he was supposed to, even as a decent fighter. And Justin Lawrence, when he came in off Tough, he was hailed, or into Tough, he was hailed as like, this great black house prospect, training under Anderson Silva and all that, just really athletic, really talented, and it's one thing to get knocked out by Max Holloway, but it's another, and to also get submitted by Daniel Pineda, but then to get split decision lost to Emmanuel Sanchez, just like, where are you picking up here? Like, you're not hitting that Anderson Silva hype, certainly.
In all fairness, if Sanchez didn't land that kick at the end of the second, Lawrence would have won that round, thus probably winning the split decision.
Yeah, it's, like, fighting is a game of inches. It's not to say these guys are bad fighters. They're both good fighters. It's just they were both hyped as future elite fighters, guys that were expected to be challenging for titles or fighting at the top of their divisions at some point. So in that way, I think it's a very big crossroads fight for them.
What do you think happens to the loser here?
I mean, I gotta assume Bellator keeps both guys around just because they generate interest and are cheap, I'm sure. But it's definitely one of those things where it's going to be really hard to get excited about the loser of this fight unless they put on a ridiculous show in a loss.
And I think that probably stands to be more true for Lawrence than Kobayashi. It's true for both, but I think it probably hurts Lawrence more due to the lack of fights on his record and the fact he's a younger fighter too. So I don't know. It probably hurts him more.
Kobayashi's only 27. I think it's just
not true. Yeah.
They're neither guy is, they're both guys that people are still burning small, like I'm still burning a small candle for both of them, where I'm just like, Kobayashi, he's tough, he's scrappy, he hits hard, he's an interesting fighter. I'd like to see him succeed. I always like to see Japanese fighters succeed internationally. Lawrence is a good athlete. He's got a funky style. He's got a fun, exciting style. I'd love to see him really solidify that into being a great elite-level fighter. But at some point, you lose enough fights at lower levels of competition, and it's just kind of like, I don't really care that much anymore.
I think Vic's right, though, with Lawrence kind of needing to win a little bit more. Because at least Kobayashi has a Japanese fan base to fall back on. Like, you don't exactly need to win all your fights when you got kind of niche.
I mean, Japan doesn't care much about MMA. Like,
yeah, Japan is very strange.
You just got that new TV deal, right?
Well,
I'm not sure.
Ryzen, you mean? Yeah.
No, I thought I'm pretty sure that Bellator just got a TV deal with some.
I don't know, maybe, but. Like, I wouldn't bet on Japanese fans booing Japanese fighters. Seems like most of the Japanese fighters I hear about over there are all, like, dirt poor, living with their parents, like, no money, no recognition, no nothing. I don't know. I wouldn't bet on it. Okay, on that note, let's dive into the main card. Not to swamp Eddie's dreams of Kobayashi having massive amounts of support. Maybe he does. But let's jump past the prelims into the first main card fight: Rebecca Ruth versus Delima Lay McFarlane. And is this Vic? Oh no, it's Eddie.
I think it's on me.
It's Eddie.
Whatever. I've lost.
Hey.
I am excited for this fight. I think Rebecca Ruth is something special. I think she has this certain physicality that we see from Cyborg that we do not see from many female fighters. Like, they just kind of lack this certain just Debo-ness, and Rebecca Ruth has it, man. She was a slight underdog against Lena Ochenikova, and she came out and beat her at her own game. I mean, she got in her face, she put hands on her, she tossed her around, she ragdolled her. I mean, she put on a performance, and I mean, that's tough for anyone to deal with, especially at 125 pounds. Like, which female 125 pounders are dropping other 125 pounders? I mean, you don't see that too often. I mean, hell, you don't even see that in the men's division. But, Alima Lay McFarlane, she got her start from that infamous soccer mom knockout, and she comes from that explode scene over in California that gets a lot of kind of negative publicity for being somewhat of an easy circuit. And, along those lines, McFarlane hasn't fought anyone in her professional career as of yet with a winning record. So this is a huge step up for her, and it's going to be a huge measuring stick for her. And I just don't think at this point in her career she is necessarily ready for what's about to happen. So I got to go with Rebecca Ruth here, and I can see her being a huge favorite, and I can see her getting the finish. So I'm going to go with Rebecca Ruth, TKO, second round.
I gotta say, I'm a little sad after your hype on Ruth and how hyped you are on Ruth that she's 37. So whatever physical gifts she has to impress upon fans are going to probably be pretty short-lived.
True, but strength is the last one to go, and that's
I know. I'm just saying, like, most fighters, if you're getting your start in your MMA career at 37, we're not expecting you to be around at 47.
For sure.
All right, Vic, what are your thoughts?
Well, the situation here with Ruth, and she really does deserve a little bit of attention here, is the fact that it seemed like she was kind of like the sacrificial lamb against Ochenikova, who we mentioned, and that kind of blew up pretty heavy. It was a really interesting fight because it wasn't just, and like Eddie mentioned, she made it as ugly as she had to make it happen. She just implemented that mom strength and just, did what she had to do, and it turned out to be a pretty, not a very aesthetically pleasing fight, but still a very interesting fight to watch. It was still fun to see, like, oh man, she's really going to do this. And McFarlane, who is 4-0 as an amateur and 3-0 as a professional, I was ready to give Bellator massive props for bringing her along just slowly enough, not try to capitalize too quickly on this whole situation where she showed up on World Star and she blew onto the scene with this in this controversial manner. But at this point, I don't know if she might be running into that same buzzsaw right here. I mean, if Ochenikova couldn't really do anything standing to really hurt Ruth and put her away, I'm not sure how McFarlane's going to be able to do that. I understand that she can put a pretty crazy pace. I just don't see it. Ruth's wrestling is just, it's very basic, but it's good enough. She can tag people and she's just really, really capable of hurting an opponent with one or two shots and really make them consider what their next move is going to be. So I really got to go with Ruth on this. Her only loss is to Jocelyn Liebarger, and she's got 5 TKOs on her record, man. Don't underestimate her. If there's decent money to be made here and McFarlane is a favorite, well, then you might want to do something about that.
I hate to burst everybody's bubble because Ruth is neither. I mean, maybe it's good for Eddie because Ruth isn't a huge favorite, but she's certainly not an underdog either. The odds are close to even, along with Elima McFarlane is minus 105. Rebecca Ruth minus 135. So
Okay, now to that, I think I can definitely make a case because of how aggressive Ruth can be. I mean, there are a plethora of openings for someone to exploit. I mean, they are there standing and they are there on the ground. But, I mean, can someone just withstand the physicality long enough to take advantage of that? Is someone a specialist, enough of a specialist to where they can seize those kind of moments? And I just don't think McFarlane is at this point. Based off of her level of competition, I think these odds are a little too tight for me.
yeah, well, and I mean, unfortunately too. I mean, just especially in McFarlane's case, when you're only 3-0, there's really not much to know about a fighter. Honestly, like you can get a good sense maybe of their physicality, and if they have some exceptional skills that they're bringing in from a past career, boxing, kickboxing, wrestling, but otherwise, you're really kind of shooting blind here with fighters that young in their careers to what they're actually going to be able to show up and do. And that brings us to Matt Mitrione versus Carl Semanathapa. And Vic, that's you.
All right. Well, first, a little background on who it is, because we all know who Mitrione is. Semanathapa, not as well known, obviously. Now, he's got losses on his record to DJ Lindemann, UFC veteran Jack May, LeVar Johnson, Shane Del Rosario, and Dave Huckabee. His most notable wins have been against C.J. Levesque, Ruben Villarreal, and Josh Appelt, who we fought prior to. They fought outside of Bellator. And 2 wins against Javier Ayala, one in Bellator, one from a couple of years ago. Now, his last win against Ayala was absolutely brutal. And the thing about Semanathapa is that he's one of those cats who, you know, you want to talk about clunky and phase shifting. Now, this guy really operates on a one-track thing at one time. He can hit absolutely very, very hard, but he's got some very big defensive liabilities. Sometimes he'll keep one of his hands down. He backs up in a straight line a lot after he gets tagged. He'll try to go for some sort of counter, wild swinging shot well after his opponent is out of range. His mobility just isn't there. And Mitrione's a guy who, for all of his faults, he's worked on his footwork. His boxing has become much more crisp and sharp. Sure, he's had some lapses in his fight IQ at certain moments, but Semanathapa is super durable, and we've talked about fighters like this as well. You know, you can only Homer Simpson your way through so many fights before eventually it starts to just fall off. His jiu-jitsu game is apparently pretty good on the competitive circuit. I don't see much of it translating as well to MMA. He is pretty good at getting up once he's been taken down, but not really much else to offer off his back. Also, he seems to have a liability. For as strong as he is, he seems to have a problem with being held against the cage and mugged in some of these bouts. So I don't know if that's going to be a factor here either, but I think Mitrione just has way much more polish in his game and his fight IQ that he's eventually going to be able to capitalize and win. Not only that, let's not forget that Mitrione can hit pretty damn hard. So even if he doesn't put away Semanathapa, he would be able to conceivably put on a massive hurting. Now, Carl does have an opportunity to, with one shot, put this away. I just don't see him getting that opportunity unless it's really early on, and I don't think he's got the gas tank for that. So Mitrione pretty much has this in the bag.
All right, Eddie, your thoughts?
I think Semanathapa has been around everywhere. I mean, Elite XC, Show XC, M1, Strikeforce, Gladiator Challenge, King of the Cage, Bellator. I mean, this dude's been everywhere. But, you know, he's been everywhere. 10-6, 9 of those have been by KO, so he's a finisher. Four of his 6 losses have been by knockout, so, you know, he's not afraid to go out on the shield.
He's a glass cannon.
What's that?
He's a glass cannon.
A glass cannon.
Wow, that's probably a bit too harsh because it's not like he's going down with one shot. It takes a lot to put him away.
Yeah, he can take.
Well, he's been he's been knocked out in 18 seconds, 2 minutes and 57 seconds, and I don't know what the time on his other knockout losses were because they were in fights that don't have a recorded time.
Well,
But I mean,
never mind then.
No, yeah, but the thing with him is, of course, he's tough and he has pretty solid top control and he has heavy ground and pound. He's just inconsistent. He's been Christmas treeing since 2012. Win-loss, win-loss, win-loss. And, I mean, nobody beats Matt Mitrione except for Matt Mitrione. So, I mean, remember when he fought Derek Lewis and he did that forearm smash? Like, he's beating people with forearm smashes. Like, come on. I got Matt Mitrione. As long as he stays smart and protects his FIQ, Mitrione all day.
well, his last two fights in the UFC against Ben Rothwell and Travis Brown, who are at least, pretty stable top 10 heavyweights in the world. They're not maybe top 5 necessarily. I mean, both have flirted with the top 5, but they're not consistently there. Still, like, both those fights, Mitrione was reasonably competitive, especially the Travis Brown fight. He was reasonably competitive. He was doing fine in the Ben Rothwell fight until he panicked and shot for a takedown and got choked out. But in the Travis Brown fight, he was doing really, well until he got poked in the eye a bunch. So,
Man, who besides Matt Mitrione has fought all of their fights inside of the UFC?
not many. It usually only happens with guys who, like him, come in off tough. And I'm trying to remember the last guy that came in off tough with.
Was it Ramsey Nijam or was it Mir Sadala?
It was Amir Sadala. Ramsey Nijam might have too. I don't know.
No way, not Amir Sadala. Because he's from my area. I know he was fighting pro.
I don't think so.
No, I think he might have fought amateur and then he ended up. I'm not sure.
Does he still fight? What happened to him? He fought like Akiyama and that was it.
Not lately. No, I'm looking at it now. Sadala's entire professional record started in the UFC. Yes.
Yep. So anyway, it happened.
Rare.
Mitrione is, he's a consistently borderline top 10 heavyweight. He's the kind of dude who can beat Gabriel Gonzaga and Derek Lewis and Sean Jordan, and you can trust him to do it pretty much every time. He's not. He may be really inconsistent against guys like Rothwell and Brown, and not be able to get those big wins that make him an elite heavyweight. But until I see him actually really fall off a cliff, it's hard for me to pick him against somebody who lost to DJ Linderman in 2015. I mean, we're not talking DJ Linderman like 5 years ago when he was just sort of like this random brawler coming out of nowhere winning fights. We're talking about a dude who has, like, Carl Sumanatafa, Jeff Monson, and some dude named Terrell Bozen are DJ Lindeman's only wins since 2013 when he beat Mike Hayes. So, Linderman has been on a hell of a cold streak.
Yeah. Honestly, I like the way Matt Mitrione stacks up against the Bellator heavyweight division.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, I don't see any reason why he won't be competing for a title pretty soon. And honestly, I would say he's got the top 3. He's in my top 3 for best footwork in the heavyweight division.
I worry about his chances against Czech Congo.
They already fought once.
I mean, Mitrione and Congo are both the kind of dudes where, like, you mostly expect them to show up and fight really well, but I could easily see that just being a weird fucking fight. Like, I expect
they fought already once.
Yeah.
They did, yes.
And that was kind of a weird affair.
Precisely, yes.
I think Mitrione could easily win a title there. I just would not trust him to then defend it. It would be like, I could see him winning and then getting, like, knocked out by Javi Ayala or something, and you'd be like, what? What is this? Because that's just,
it would be like a submission to somewhere. It has to be.
I don't know. Anyway.
Like to Rampage. He gets submitted by Rampage.
The odds on that fight are about as long as you'd expect. Mitrione coming in at minus 420. Sumanatafa coming in at plus 300. So that's
insane.
That is insane. Heavyweight fights should never be more than plus or minus 200 in any direction unless you are so sure that, you know, unless it's like Cain Velasquez versus Carl Semanathapa, then
Or like Cain Velasquez versus me. Then
Yeah.
like, okay, he could be minus 1,000.
yeah. But
And then some.
anything else with heavyweights, it should never be more than plus or minus 200 because it's always a weird chance of somebody just getting their lights punched out with one punch. That brings us to our co-main event: Michael Chandler versus Patricky Freire. And Vic, I believe it's back to you. Or no, is it Eddie? I don't know. It's Eddie.
I think it's
Eddie. There we go. I never remember. This is terrible. But Chandler, Freire, talk us through it, Eddie.
Zane, you have one job. One job.
You dirty motherfucker.
Nah, man, I'm so happy for this fight. I'm more excited for this fight than any fight on this card. And honestly, I'm more excited for this title fight than any fight that Will Brooks would have been in. I'm just going to say that right now.
Oh,
Dude, look at this fight. No. I love Will Brooks. I'm not hating on Will Brooks.
It sounded like you were.
The dynamite in this fight here, this is where the dynamite comes from. Dynamite 2, this is the dynamite on this card. Man, this is a rematch, but this time it's for a title. For the vacant lightweight title, Will Brooks jumped ship, went to the UFC. Now there's a void that needs to be filled. And what two better guys? They're both coming off back-to-back wins. They're both just, man, they have lightning in their hands, and they are not afraid to swing. I'm getting goosebumps just thinking about this.
No, yeah, it is. Never mind. Sorry, looking at the wrong guy. It is. You're right. Like,
yeah,
yeah, they have that Bellator 44.
Mm-hmm. And that was a pretty good match. A little testy. Chandler, you know, he got a couple goalposts off, 3 if I remember right, and so it was kind of weird. But he still was pretty dominant and was able to control Pitbull. And you know, Pitbull just wasn't the same after the ball shots, quite honestly. And man, towards the end of it, I mean, he was just holding him down, smashing him, throwing elbows. It was it got a little tough to watch there at the end. But this is crazy right here. This is crazy. Who has improved more since they first fought? I don't know. I feel like, you know, Marcin Held was able to hold Pitbull down. And granted, he's a phenomenal jiu-jitsu guy, but I mean, Chandler was a Division I All-American wrestler. So I think he will definitely be able to hold Pitbull down as he did in the first match, perhaps, if he can avoid getting knocked out. And as we've seen the progression of Chandler, yes, his striking is now, you know, you see more head movement from him, but on the same token, I feel like his reaction time isn't what it used to be necessarily. And, you know, we kind of seen him start to get tagged a little bit more. And we saw that in the second fight with David Rickles. I mean, David Rickles was getting off on him in that second round. You know, I mean, he didn't hurt him and he didn't damage him, but that's David Rickles. Like, David Rickles was finding his chin. And, I mean, you can't let Pitbull find your chin. I mean, he just hits way too hard. So, I don't know. I'm going to have butterflies for this, and I have to pick Chandler because I feel like he has more avenues to win, but this is a toss-up. But I'm going to go Chandler, and I'm going to go by decision.
Yeah, I will say that I think what we saw in the Rickles fight, yeah, I remember I talked to Rickles right before that fight too, and what we saw is like the absolute pinnacle of Rickles' potential in that fight, which, like, he was just, you know, his training was perfect. He'd finally been treating himself like a full-time fighter, finally been working the way he should have. Everything was clicking. He was getting all the right pieces in place, and it just turns out that he's still not good enough to not get his ass whipped by Michael Chandler. Like, that's the result we saw, was like, he's just not a good enough athlete, and he came out there and he did everything perfect, and Chandler just walked through it and beasted him. So I think that may have, like, I mean, because otherwise, like, Chandler has still looked, you know, when he's not fighting Will Brooks, he's still looked really powerful against Derek Campos and against Rickles when he needed to. Like, it still seems like the pieces are there and firing. So I don't know. Like that Brooks fight was super weird. But it seems like he may be bouncing back from that. I think the Rickles fight may be more to do with Rickles like really putting together a perfect plan to fight Chandler and just finding out he couldn't. Anyway, Vic, what are your thoughts?
Yeah, well, first off, to Eddie's point about Will Brooks, I mean, come on, man. Did you not see both of those fights against Chandler? Come on, they were both really good fights. I mean, the first one was controversial and close, but that second one was weird, but it was good.
You're right, it was.
I'll give you this, man. This bout, it really is, as Eddie mentioned, though, in all seriousness, largely about who's experienced more growth since they last fought. And I really think that the answer to that is Michael Chandler. I mean, he's out there with the Black Zillions. He's been, ever since the departure from Lions of Neil Melanson as his head grappling coach. Well, Chandler kind of bonded with him, and he went out to Florida to train with him for a bit, and he's kind of really hitting a bit of a stride. We've seen that both of them are on a 2-fight win streak, but there's a few things that I've noted in Chandler's performances that seem to indicate that he hasn't plateaued yet. There is still a degree of growth that he's going through, and he's looking pretty damn good, whereas Patricky, I don't know if it's the fact that he's been, I mean, how long has he been fighting? Since he was like 16, 17, something crazy like that? And as our good friend now, Dr. Patrick Wyman, has noted, that fighters on average seem to have that 9-year curve where, that's pretty much where they hit their peak and then things start to fall off. I don't know if we're at that point yet with Patrick. We might just be there, and if we're not, we're pretty damn close. And, I think Chandler's going to be able to exploit a lot of those same vulnerabilities that we've seen in the past, whether it's that willingness to get into a dogfight up close, the lack of head movement when it really matters, the ability to be taken down because you get too caught up with the striking. I really just don't see. Pitbull could certainly put him away, but it seems to me like Michael Chandler is the stronger option here by way of having more opportunities to dominate in more aspects of the fight. So I'm going to go with Chandler on this.
We'll say that, too, it seems like Pitbull has consistently, it seems like, had really struggled with flashy elite athletes. Guys who can move quickly and who are willing to be exciting and to come after him and be aggressive. That's where he struggles. Derek Anderson beat him twice just basically being a flashy athlete. Like, Derek Anderson has no other real functional parts to his game other than the fact that he's athletic and he's aggressive. And, Marcin Held has a win over him, and obviously Eddie Alvarez and Michael Chandler, and most of the guys he's beat, Edmilson Souza he's got some of the flash. I don't think he's that great an athlete. Ryan Couture, Sada Wad, Derek Campos, David Rickles, like, these guys are all decent, but they're not elite athletes.
Yeah, they're definitely not a better athlete than Pitbull, and Chandler is, if not equal, better.
Yeah. Chandler falls much more in line with that Derek Anderson, Marcin Held, Eddie Alvarez line of guys that have beat Pitbull.
And, like, as far as who's gotten better, I think it's safe to say that Pitbull probably has gotten better. We're starting to see him mix in takedowns and, start to be a little more of a fast starter when he needs to be. With Ryan Couture, he knocked him out pretty quickly. But like Zane was saying about Rickles, it's like, okay, even if he puts together the perfect game plan, it still might not be enough to defeat Michael Chandler.
I mean, the only people that beat Chandler are Will Brooks and Eddie Alvarez, and that still says something, you know? So I got to pick Chandler, too, and it'd be fun to see Freire win, if for no other reason than Matthias Aquino on Twitter, his manager, who follows me on Twitter, and I like that dude, so I want to see his fighters win.
Yeah, he's actually real cool. I got to hang out with him a bit at the this past Friday at the WSOF 31. He was in the house. So he's a funny dude.
He's a cool dude. I like him, and I want his fighters to win. I don't even care about his fighters necessarily, but, like, because they're his fighters, I want them to win. So that's my rooting interest, but I got to pick Chandler here too. Chandler is the favorite, minus 260. Freire, the underdog, plus 180.
And just for the record, this should definitely be the main event. I understand that Rampage is the draw, but this is the relevance. This is the sport aspect. This should be the main event.
Yeah, but I mean, Rampage is a way larger draw. It's not like a relatively they kind of draw similarly, but because Chandler's small, nobody cares. Or, Bellator thinks nobody cares. No, Rampage is a huge deal. And
for sure. It just makes me sad a little on the inside.
I know. That brings us to our main event. Quentin Rampage Jackson versus Satoshi Ishii. Vic, break it down.
Okay, well, first we got to step back a little for a second and kind of look exactly at what is going on here. Now, Rampage had that situation that his management had claimed that his contract allowed for him to have an out clause to leave the organization if certain conditions weren't met. We all remember that whole deal. He left, he fought for the UFC. Bellator took this whole thing to court, defended their interests, and eventually they came to some sort of agreement where Rampage would come back for what I believe is rumored to be 2 fights, and this is one of them. So what is Bellator going to do? They obviously want to monetize this opportunity. They want to capitalize on the draw that is Rampage Jackson and make as much bank off him as they can. But what are they going to do in the process? They can't have him fight a guy like Matt Mitrione right off the bat. They're going to bring in somebody else so it doesn't make their organization or their guys, someone in their division, look that bad. And not only that, you get someone like Ishii who has a bit more of international cachet. He's fought some legends as well, Olympic, judoka, gold medalist. I mean, there's a lot of things that you can tag on to this. Now, when you look at the actual meat that's on the bone, that's where you start to find a lot of the problems here. Ishii has fought some very established veterans. And by that I mean fighters that have been a little, in some cases a lot past their prime. Guys like Phil DeFries, he fought Fedor Emelianenko, got knocked out. He fought Krokop, got knocked out. It's really difficult to see any justification for this going on, where you're putting a guy who's been knocked out, not just knocked out a couple of times, but knocked out as badly a couple of times as Ishii has, and putting him in there against a guy who you're pretty much banking on winning by knockout in Rampage Jackson. So from an ethical standpoint, it's like, it does make you a bit queasy. It's like, okay, well, I mean, this is what you want, but okay, fine. Setting that aside, Ishii has way too many defensive lapses standing, and for a guy who is such a high-level judoka, you don't see him implementing his judo as well as you might think in his MMA bouts. We saw him in that Ryzen show against Yuri Prohaska, and I mean, it didn't look good. It just hasn't looked, and this is a younger fighter. Obviously Rampage isn't as spry as he used to be, but he's recovered from a lot of his nagging injuries. He's certainly not anywhere near as sharp-worn as Fedor Emelianenko was when Ishii fought him, or Krokop when Ishii fought him. So I just don't see how this is going to work. I don't see Ishii coming in and neutralizing the distance and then getting any sort of work in from there. What's he going to do, knock out Rampage? Good luck. I mean, when was the last time that happened, and who did it? Does Ishii have those kind of chops? I don't see that. I just don't. I don't think he's going to be able to really work out anything that would really that would net him any crazy advantage, unless there's some sort of great hip toss from up against the cage and then he starts to work for a submission. I really don't see any other avenue for Ishii to win, so I am sorry to say it, but this is a bit of a sad tale, and Rampage should be able to win this fight.
All right, Eddie, your pick?
Man, this is a freak show fight.
Oh, yeah.
I don't trust this fight at all. I think it's weird, and I expect some bullshit to go down. Straight up. I don't think this is just weird. Ishii is suspect on my radar. In his last fight, there was that phantom kick that it appeared to be. Did he really get hurt off that? Did he not? Did he take a dive? Did he not? I don't know, but they're putting someone with 4 wins against someone coming off a head kick loss. So I mean, I don't know what's really going on here. I can't legitimately analyze this in all seriousness. Like we can go break down who's the better fighter here. Like you can't do that in this one. You got Ishii, he always, any name is either past their prime or he thinks they're past their prime and he's wrong. So he's either going to beat an old dude or he's going to get knocked out by someone he thought was past their prime and they're not, which is Rampage. So, I mean, I can't see any reason why anyone would seriously pick Ishii to win this. And whenever I feel like that, it's always the opposite that happens. Joe Schilling and Kato, Brandon Halsey and Carvalho. So I think it's just, I feel like Ishii's there's gonna be some weirdness and it's just not gonna go down like people think. So I guess my official pick will be Jackson, but I'll pick neither in this one and say it's gonna be some BS. So.
Oh, backing out.
You can't pick in this fight. This is not a real fight. I'm upset it's a main event.
I will say this. Having talked to Ishii, he seems like a really nice dude, and I hope he wins because, I don't know, he sounds pretty devoted to the whole thing. Like, I kept kind of expecting him to either, A, not think that it was like, he's already fought a bunch of people and to not think this was a really big deal, or to just be like, yeah, whatever, MMA is fun, it's what I do, I don't really care. But he's like seriously dedicated to like, I want every fight I fight to be the hardest fight I can get. And I mean, the thing is, in part of that you might be like, well, then why the hell did you fight, Phil DeFries or Kazuyuki Fujita, for instance? And it's just like, but it's heavyweight MMA, and like, how much more legit can you get on the regional scene at heavyweight? Because too, I talked to him and like he said, this is the first opportunity he's really had to come to the U.S. Like he hasn't had like Bellator or the UFC knocking on his door before this. Really, like he had a chance to go to the Ultimate Fighter right when he got out of the Olympics, and he wasn't willing to jump in that early. But it's interesting, like. I have some respect for the guy because it does seem like he is legitimately looking to fight whatever the toughest fight he can get is. But that also means he's going to end up losing some bad fights,
I just feel like I haven't seen a legit performance from him. Like, what legit performances does he really have?
Yeah, I know. The biggest thing I'm kind of expecting is that, honestly, this fight may just kind of be 3 rounds of either like cage pushing or staring at each other, where Rampage is not willing to or gets too tired to pull the trigger, and Ishii is unwilling to jump in and be aggressive enough to get hurt.
We may get a bit of both. I mean, we may see just Rampage hunting for that for the counter shot.
Yep.
Countering something that's not going to come. It could be something along those lines too. I mean, you never know.
Yeah, because
honestly, my prediction would be like a Ishii first round submission. Something just off the wall, completely not going to happen. Look at the odds, and whatever the least likely prop bet is, that's probably what's going to happen.
At the moment, the only prop bet is over 1.5 and under 1.5 rounds.
How close?
Plus 160 on under 1.5, minus 210 on over 1.5. The odds overall, Jackson is, of course, a large favorite, minus 420. Ishii, a sizable underdog, plus 300. Should be noted, this fight's a catchweight 215. Ishii is not a big heavyweight, but this is... Basically, he's cutting down as far as he can to get this fight made, is what he told me. Like, he's going as low as he can get to comfortably to get Rampage to come up and fight him. So. Yeah,
he walks around at about a good maybe 230 or something like that, right? He's about that sturdy. Oh, okay.
45 is his normal walking around weight. So. Yeah, he's going down 30 pounds just to kind of make this fight happen.
I don't like this fight.
I love it because I love freak show MMA. I am an unabashed fan of weird shit in the cage, and I wish Dynamite had 5 more fights like it, and I would think of it much more like a Dynamite show. Final thing I want to hear, Eddie and then Vic. Do you think Kato beats Schilling in a kickboxing match?
No, I don't.
Okay.
I think.
No, I don't care. I don't care about why. I don't want to hear why. Vic, what are your thoughts?
Maybe, but I'm leaning towards no. And I think it has to do, the.
Okay, no, I don't want to. Yeah, I don't want to hear your thoughts either.
I don't want to get that far into it either, so I kind of had to step back. But yeah, I doubt it highly.
All right, because that will be going on at some point. Hopefully, it'll air during the broadcast of Dynamite. I can't guarantee that. I have no idea.
What about you? What about Zane? What is your pick?
My pick?
Are you picking the best middleweight in the world?
Am I picking the best middleweight in the world, Joe Schilling? As he was eager to remind me when I talked to him. Just for the shit of it, I feel like I want to pick Kato because he's such a nice dude, and that's the fun way to pick it. But I would be pretty shocked if Kato won a straight kickboxing match against Joe Schilling. All right. On that note, you can find me on Twitter at TheZaneTime. You can find Eddie on Twitter at TheEddieMercado. You can find Vic on Twitter at VicMRodriguez. You can find all three of us on Bloody Elbow. Give this video a like. That's a thumbs up. Subscribe to MMANation.com. That's DOTCOM over on YouTube. That way you get all our latest shows, videos, analysis, interviews, all that other shit we're doing. I don't think we're going to have a Dynamite 6 round, but we'll have Knuckle Up coming next week and Heavy Hands and If I Did It and the Prospectus. I don't know if we'll be doing a Vivisection. I don't know what's going on next week. There are no UFC shows, but we'll be starting to gear up heavy towards the 3 UFC event run, probably starting next week. Maybe do a few other shows just surrounding that event, talking about it, getting ready for it, getting hyped for it. Thanks for joining me, and we'll see you next time.